So I wanted to tell someone about this because I find it really fascinating. So there's a lot of Abrahamic religions that used the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament. They share that in common with each other. And I recently learned that almost all of the Abrahamic religions actually have a different designated archangel of death. And I find that really interesting. For example, in Catholicism and in Christianity, the archangel of death is usually Uriel, which I don't know what that name means because I don't personally, as an occultist myself, I don't do any work with that one. The other ones, and I'm sure there's probably some I'm missing here, but this is the main three I know of. Uriel is the Catholic angel of death. And then in Judaism, it's Samiel. But here's a really interesting thing: Samiel is also kind of the devil. It's a bit complicated. They're like overlapped characters, in a way. It's one way of seeing it. In Judaism, the angel of death is also kind of the adversary character. So they have like a combined sort of role. And then in Islam, the archangel of death is Azriel, and that's the one that I personally is one of my favorites. Azriel and Samiel are both my favorite depictions, but all of these angels are archangels of death, and they're supposed to be like the main death, but they're all different. They have different stories, they have different lore, but they're all equally death. So it's like different divisions of death that are all part of the same whole of death. But I find it really, really fascinating because all of these faiths, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, have some texts in common, but then there's also divides. Like, this is one of the divides, for example. There's different angels for death, but they're all death, and they're all the main death. And I think it's really cool. And I like how it's almost kind of polytheistic in a way to me, because I'm someone where, like, I think all of it's equally canon. I don't really agree with, oh, these books are canon, these books aren't canon. I think anything ever written about spirits or anything is equally canon to me anyways. But it's really cool that, like, even among what we usually consider to be monotheistic faiths, there can be such differences where, like, there's supposed to be one entity in charge of death, but then there's still different ones across the different Abrahamic religions, and I think that's super, super cool. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think that's really cool. But my personal favorite interpretations of forms of death is Azriel and Samiel. Azriel's my favorite because that's the one I met in a dream vision, who I hold the highest regard for of, like, any of the angels. But they're all death. And I think that's just pretty snazzy that there's, like, different interpretations and things there. And I recently met a fellow mage who worked with different death deities from my own. They worked with Anubis and Hades. And I'm like, oh, I've never met anyone else who liked death as much as me. It's like, tell me about, like, your experiences there. And I find it really, really fascinating because all of these things are equally death, but they're also kind of different, but they're also all death. It's nice. It's cool.